Welcome to CTO Think, a podcast about leadership, product development, and tech decisions between two recovering chief technology officers. Here are your hosts, Don Vandemark and Randy Burgess.
Hey Don, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. Took a little time off over the past week, which then translated into having to work during that time off, which is probably another discussion for another time. But in general, had a good time. Spent some time with family and friends. So good time overall. How about you?
Pretty much neck deep in React Native, and Firebase. Constantly wanting to call you up and ask you, why are we doing that this way? I could have been done with a relational database about 2 weeks ago. I made really good progress.
Learning.
I know. I know. Well, some of it's learning, and some of it's where just pure experience of, I already know how to do this, and relational databases aren't bad. I know why I'm using Firebase for these particular apps, and it has to do with scaling and that kind of thing. But definitely, it's an interesting kind of experience where you're using a new tool, you understand how to use it, but it feels like it's just not efficient. There's also a debate, and it's kind of funny because I see more Twitter backlash about single page apps and front end, like React frameworks and Vue frameworks. I'm seeing more and more of the crowd that grew up with Rails and Express backends and Django backends are kind of saying, like, why are we, what is the benefit out of these front end frameworks? And this is a discussion for another time, and it's probably still a good CTO Think discussion, but it's interesting that I'm starting to see backlash, and I feel it might be because people are now in that maintenance phase of all these front end frameworks, and they're not liking the maintenance part. So,
for sure.
So I don't know. We'll have to. I'm making progress. I've learned a ton. I could definitely work for anybody that needs Firebase or React type of work now. I have no qualms with that. But I don't know that I want it as much as who wants a good old fashioned Rails app kind of thing.
Well,
so
that's what I was going to say. You're technically capable, but do you really want to?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the topic for this week is definitely something is a subject that I've had to grapple with over the course of my career. And I guess bottom line is, what do you do when people don't listen to you? And it's more about the people above you. They've hired you for expertise, for technical risk management, for skills that they don't have. Yet, when it comes down to important decisions, sometimes the people that have hired you or the people that you answer to don't listen to your advice. And maybe bad things happen. And I want to talk about, there's a psychological effect it has on you, the consultant, the expert, yourself as an executive. And then how do you handle it? What do you do when things go wrong and you want to say, I told you so kind of thing? So that's the topic that I would like to tackle today. I'm not sure the best place to start. I guess I'll first ask you, how often do you find yourself in that position?
Often enough to where it's frustrating. And I think that's probably true of anybody. And then it comes down, in my mind, when those things happen, it comes down to, what is my place in that hierarchy? What am I being asked to do? And that helps guide my next step. So I'll give an example. So in my role with Construction Specialties, um, I am the COO, and not obviously, but I'm also the one in charge of any technology. Um, and then it's not so much a case of proposing a technology and people going, "Oh, what about this other technology?" It's more a case of just getting people on board,
Yeah.
just a change of behavior. And in those cases, it's a question of managing up or managing down. Um, if you're managing down, then you have a little authority to work with. Not that you want to wield it like a dictator, but you have a little authority behind what you're asking. When you're managing up, you have to use influence. You have to start figuring out ways that you can say, "Hey, this is how it benefits the business." And depending on who you're having that discussion with, even go so far as to figure out what the benefit is to them and make it very personal.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's a psychological part that I've had to grow up about.
Sure.
Going back to, let's say, leaving college and taking my first couple of jobs, where I just got emotionally angry when a boss or manager or whomever hired me would ask me for advice or give me a set of goals that were really difficult and said, "I want you to take care of this and get it done." And then the process that I was employing to get it done, they would come in and basically pull the carpet out from under me. And they would do it a number of ways. It wasn't like they were saying, "I want you to fail now." It would be some kind of choice they would make. Could be budgetary restriction, could be choice of a vendor, could be choice of a technology. And just for no reason that I could see other than gut feel that was came from no basis, they would just say, you're not going to be able to do it that way. And then all of a sudden, what I had figured out, what I thought in my mind I had figured out as being the solution, was suddenly I wasn't an option because of, in my mind, someone else's lack of expertise getting in the middle. And I would get angry. I would get passive aggressive.
Right.
If you don't want me to succeed, then I just won't do it. We'll see what happens, that kind of thing. And
Right.
I definitely had to change. I went the other way over the years to a completely, all right, whatever you want, you're in charge. Chips will fall where they may. And but the problem that I found is that they forget that they overruled you, that you came with
Right.
a possible solution in a certain way. And so now you look like you didn't know what you were doing in the first place. So, but I do want to make clear that it's not that when someone has made a choice that circumvents my advice or decision, that I was always right. That's not been the case. So I have to eat crow personally inside and go, "Oh, there was a reason for that decision. There was there was reasoning along that line that I wasn't aware of." And I had to I've had to mature on that. So let's talk about the psychological side of it first before we get
Sure.
into how to manage it. Like, how angry did you get when you found that scenario at IBM? I feel like there's almost a governance of a company that size that completely overrules everybody all the time. So maybe you get used to it, but I don't know. Like, what was the psychological effect it had on you when people didn't listen to your expertise?
Okay, so yeah, I've had, you're right, I've had it happen multiple places. At IBM, it very much was a case of resignation. Um, so I had a couple different roles at IBM. In some of the roles, I just reported up a chain, and in those cases, I'd present an idea. If it didn't fly, um, I would sometimes try to represent it in a different way to try and gain acceptance. But if I felt that the resistance was for political reasons, or B, for different business visions than what I had, I just let it go.
Yeah.
And it was more of it wasn't a, okay, let's watch it. Well, I won't, that's a lie. That's a lie. Sometimes it was okay, let's all watch this screw up. Even though I could have stopped it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times it was like, okay, that's fine. We'll move on. I've also had it happen other places, and these were situations where I really felt strongly that this was a great way to go, and due to business vision, we didn't go that way. So it was a difference in business vision.
Yeah. For me, the way to psychologically deal with being overruled is I have taken more time to try and figure out why I got overruled. Because that then gives me a number of outlets. Either I find out that the person overruled me because of risk management, like how they handle risk in their mind and their threshold for that, or ego. They simply are choosing whatever is the opposite of what I chose. And that's happened. Like, where I saw a pattern of, oh, this person actually just decides whatever I don't go, like whatever I don't recommend. And that tells me I don't need to keep working there. Or like, here's a great example. Or it's not a great example, but it's a personal one. I worked for my mom for about 6 months after college. I quit my first job with Ernst & Young and went back and worked with my mom's small business, which was home remodeling. And I was kind of office manager for about 6 months. And it was as simple as she had said, can you handle health insurance for us? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. So I was digging in and doing all this research, and I recommended an insurance plan. And my mom was like, no, that's not going to work. I don't want to do that. And I was kind of defeated. I was like, man, I just spent a week doing all this research for a task she gave me. And then later that afternoon, an insurance salesman walks in the door, proposes the same exact plan to my mom. And she's like, hey, Randy, you should talk to this guy. He's got a great system. And I was like, that was the moment of truth of the reason I'm being overruled here is that this woman like raised me. She gave birth to me. She changed my diapers. There's no way in heck I am ever going to have in her mind the insight that is necessary for her business. And right. I just said, and I let go at that moment. I was like, oh, this is never going to work. Because, that was a psychological win for me because I didn't get mad about it. I focused on finding something that really fit me better. And I did. I found a better gig and moved to Chicago. But that was a moment. I still think back to that of being overruled by my mom on a business thing by an insurance salesman with the same answer. And later on,
but in that case, you weren't the expert.
No,
the insurance company was the expert. So
yeah.
that one is even somewhat understandable in that sometimes the expert needs to say. And This
Yes.
is something I fight. Is I do not like talking to salespeople for technology and all that, but
Yeah.
sometimes they are the experts in those fields, so sometimes they are necessary.
Oh yeah, and
If you
you're
get the
right.
right one, then it's helpful.
But so that what you just said goes into my point of finding the reasons why you're getting overruled. And you're right. It was two factors that why I got overruled by the manager in that case. One, your kid. Two, someone acting like an expert or acting like they had better expertise or having better expertise. Obviously, the salesperson had more knowledge about insurance than I did. Understanding that was like, okay, I can psychologically deal with being overruled here. And so I handled it better. I did. I mean, I should say I got mad as a son to a mom will do. But I think over time I let go of it of like, yeah, it's just not going to work. Now,
Right.
my dad gave me this look. My dad had tried to have been the office manager with my mom's business for years. And I kind of got oh, really? She didn't listen to you kind of look. So there was a whole, I think my dad had the psychological thing down pat on that front at that point. But later on, when I was overruled, I would say I still hadn't learned completely how to deal with a manager. It made me feel like I wasn't being trusted. I guess there's a psychological effect that impact it was having on me of, I immediately took to heart, this person doesn't trust me. This person doesn't have confidence in me. I'm not doing my job right. I need to push harder. I had all of these mentally defeating responses to being overruled that now I look at as like wrong way to deal with it, dude. Like you need to quit taking it personal when someone overrules you or doesn't have confidence in your answer, even though you are 90% sure that you're right. And that's what maturity has done for me. But I'm just kind of going through this list of negative responses I would have to these because it set a course for bad decisions on my own part or bad attitude that had an effect on a team one. So another scenario was I was brought into a company. I built a team for technology, and there were a lot of incumbent managers with no technical expertise who had all their ideas that they wanted to execute. I was told by the top dog, don't listen to them. I'm the one that makes all the decisions. They're going to give you tons of ideas and opinions, but you just have to ignore it. But constantly I had these senior managers coming to me saying, you need to do this my way. Here's my idea. You need to execute this. And I was in the position of telling them like, no, the boss says no. And they would say, no, it's not the boss saying no, it's you saying no. And so I would make a decision and then I would get overruled by that person going to the boss. And then the boss would come and say, no, you need to do it their way. So I was always in this position there of getting overruled by politics. And I completely reacted to it in a negative fashion of anger. And one day someone on my team called me out and said, like, I'm so sick and tired of you complaining about those folks up the ladder. Like, it makes this entire project unworkable because all you do is complain about it. And I was venting, but I was being human, but I was also allowing my disgust with the politics to filter down on my team. And instead of, I took that feedback from the team member to heart and said, okay, I see what you're talking about. I'll change. And I've since talked to that person a couple of years later, and they're like, oh, no, everything changed after that day. You really did change your attitude. But I learned from that my psychological response to being overruled is a humongous factor in whether anything goes right after that.
Right.
It's still on me.
And
go ahead.
I think that egos, everybody's got an ego, right?
Yeah.
And ego plays a huge part in all of this. And as we gain more experience and as we mature, ego goes two ways. And as you go up the ladder, ego goes two ways. You either get better control of it so that it becomes a tool that you use for self-confidence, or you end up letting it control you, where it becomes a hammer that you swing everywhere. So as we rise up the ladder of responsibility and power, it's hard to go out there, present an idea within our field of expertise, and be told no. And political reasons are the absolute worst reason for anything to happen.
Yeah.
So it's the hardest to accept. There's no good answer for accepting a political reason. It is just let it go and either determine if that's where you need to be or if you need to be somewhere else. I do think I've switched how I handle it when it's non-political. I've switched how I handle it, and I hear why I hear that it's being rejected. I try and extract why it's being rejected. And I go back and I start over and I say, okay, this was rejected. I'm going to take the attitude that it was rejected because I didn't present it properly. So what do I need to change to present it properly and to get it accepted? And then if it fails, then you probably just let it go. But I usually always take a second crack at it in presenting it a different way. But when it's political, there's no good answer for how to deal with except to get better at politics. And I don't know that's in my DNA too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to take the attitude you're going to win some and lose some. And when you lose, just don't take it don't take it to heart that every choice or every recommendation you make is going to be accepted as the best. And they aren't always. I mean, you have to face it. You're going to make mistakes. I mean, I tell this to my students all the time. You're going to make a bunch of mistakes and it's not going to stop. Like there's not an expert level where all of a sudden you make less mistakes and the mistakes may have less of an impact, but you're still going to make mistakes. And so when someone asks you to make a choice or to lead a team and they overrule you, they may be saving your butt. You may have to accept that they have an answer better than yours for some reason too. And so if you take the attitude of you win some, you lose some on those decisions, maybe you just accept okay, I'm going to do it the way that this person chose, despite what seems like they don't know what they're making a choice on. Now,
that's an excellent point, because I know there have been things I proposed.
Oh yeah,
was 100% convinced I was right, and months later, was breathing a sigh of relief that we didn't go that direction.
Yeah. And I mean, and so there's another part of it that about all these decisions that I've also come to kind of see, and this is more looking up and having empathy for the boss. The bosses of the world, the founders that are running a company with multiple employees that have been running a business for 10 to 15, 20 years, they have been in the position since day one of making best guesses constantly. Because when they started, they were the only person, and they have to make choices on things that are not in their expertise, whether it's accounting, law, legal, the salesmanship part, whatever. And so it's in their DNA to constantly be guessing and in ballparking things. And so when it comes to your area, they've hired you now as a technical leader. They are still going to make guesses that impact the other guesses they've made. And that's what they get. If you want to make all the guesses and make all the choices, found your own company, you know?
Exactly.
And that's like, that's where you have to say, okay, I'm part of this, the founder or the bosses getting through their work, and they're going to make judgment calls. Now, it could get to a point where, like I've said before, people have, like, this person consistently would go with the other choice just because they didn't seem to have confidence in the way I was presenting it, like you were thinking. Or they had a psychological thing where they just kept going the other direction, no matter what I recommended. And I said, this person is definitely going the wrong way. I can just see it. I need to just leave this scenario. And that person, it wasn't because they weren't listening to me. It's because they just made bad choices all over. They didn't last very long after I left. But beside the point is, in a lot of cases, the person above you that's able to overrule you is making guesses themselves. And sometimes it's not going to be the guess that you're guessing too, because you don't know how the future unfolds.
Right.
So now, moving on from psychological to how to deal with it, like how to manage it. And I would usually, like, the response that I would normally do is keep in the back of my mind the choice being made, so that if things went wrong with the alternative that was chosen, I could say, I told you so. And I can say that over time, building up for the I told you so is a complete waste of energy and focus. Like, to me, your goal and energy should be towards proving that the person was right. Like, if they forced you to go, like, don't sabotage the choice that was made.
No, I'll take it a slightly different direction. It's not necessarily proving that they were right. It's not necessarily working in the direction that they were right. Mm-hmm. It's supporting their decision.
Yeah.
But there are scenarios and cases where I've supported the decision outwardly and put most of my energy there, but had the alternative ready and kept developing the alternative as a just in case, not as depending on where you are in the maturity level, not necessarily as an I told you so, more of a, okay, that didn't work, let's try this now. And being ready to go, because that, when something fails, having a ready to go alternative is a strong incentive to go that direction.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say, this is a sidebar that could probably derail the whole conversation. If you are overruled on an ethical ground, on an ethical or moral level that you can't live with, that's when you make a stand.
Sure.
Or leave. Be prepared to leave.
Sure.
I've done that before.
That makes sense, for sure.
It doesn't happen that often, but I've stood my ground when I've said no. Like, there's a number of alternatives you can do here, but the one that I won't do is this. And then all of a sudden, they back down because they saw how important that one path was to not go down with me. But
and I'll say that did happen in IBM more than it happens at smaller levels, because at IBM you're a piece, right? So they don't really care about what you think is morally or ethically clear, and in that particular scenario, it was essentially a scenario, and and we don't have to derail completely. But it
Yeah.
was essentially a scenario of we had brought in a bunch of subcontractors, and at Christmas time, IBM wanted me to pass along the corporate decision that all subcontractors were taking a 10% cut in pay and not working for the last 2 weeks of the year. So it was like that's one where at a smaller company, you're like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not, or where you're more comfortable with your career, you're like, no, you tell them. As opposed to at that point in my career at IBM, I fought, I whined, I complained, and eventually had to execute on that and tried to make it as best I could for those affected. But that didn't make me feel any better, and it didn't make the situation any better. So,
but you have a choice. I mean, I guess what I'm kind of going with is you can.
We say you have a choice. Some people have more choices.
Oh, definitely. Without kids, I have much more leeway where I can Megan and I can make choices that are more risky or have less impact. We can adjust our personal spending easily between the two of us versus kind of the locked in fees that come with raising a family, or the locked in risk, financial risk of raising a family. And yeah, people find themselves in different positions. But I do think that if for whatever reason you're choosing to stick with the job despite being overruled, it's on you to make the best of it, to not sabotage the alternative just because it wasn't your decision, as long as that's the concern part of it. But there's another factor that I do, like I'm talking about, don't sit there and wait for the "I told you so" message to make yourself feel redeemed, because it does feel good when you can say it to a boss. And I have before. They didn't always like it. But sometimes you do need to cover your ass, the CYA. And I've had plenty of times when I got overruled, and then the person that overruled me, their choice went south, and they blamed me for the choice. And I was like, where's that damn email where I told them what to do, and now they have definitely chosen to unremember, whatever the heck term it is, not accept responsibility for having made the choice. And sometimes, and I've been as blatant as like, here's the email, before you yell at me, here's the email. And other times they were just like, I don't give a crap. We need to make that work one way or the other. And because they've basically, like I said, they've lived their life making guesses, and their guess was wrong, but they don't care to dwell on it. And I, of course, at that point in my career, wanted to be the one that said, no, you didn't listen to me in the first place. Now, from a legal standpoint, as a consultant, I have been remiss in keeping details of decisions made by people that overruled me. And there's been times where if a choice was made against my recommendation and it caused a negative financial impact, I kind of needed the final email of the choice made, or a record of the choice made, just to say, like, hey, if you want to kick liability over against me, I've got some evidence that says different, that this was your choice and responsibility. Thankfully, in those cases, I had evidence, like plenty of evidence, and people to support, like, nope, you told them the financial risk here, the legal risk here, and they chose differently. But not having that smoking gun of one piece where they said this or that was important for me to keep. And it may be important in a political situation where a decision is being made on giving someone in their management position, like, who's responsible for this going south, and you need to defend yourself. That paper trail may be important, not from the standpoint of "I told you so," but from the cover your butt side.
Yeah, it definitely. definitely learned lessons along the way on that, and have had it go down that way where decision was made verbally, not documented, and the decision goes south. It comes around, and then it's finger pointing time. And I'm not of the personality to finger point. So I think you told me the other day regarding something else, nice guys finish last, sort of thing. So I think you do have to document it, get acceptance. I've gotten a lot better at it. I'm still not perfect.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm good at it. But I do try and document decisions now because that's important. It's important for legal reasons, it's important for political reasons. It's something I will not pull out without reason to. So back to the whole idea of the I told you so's. If you're working in the right place and you're working with the right people, most of the time when a decision you were against goes south, they're going to come to you and say, you were right. They're going to remember the discussion and say, you were right. We should not have done this. What should we do in this now that we've done that? It's failed. What's the next steps? And that's why I was recommending have the alternative ready. You're not working against. And I'm not saying you spend all your time working on the alternative. I say you just have it
contingency planning.
Yeah, that's all it is.
But I think on the flip side of what you like, I work with a lot of great people, and when something goes wrong, people typically own up to it, and we all work like constructively to just right the ship. But the younger me was more about right and wrong and blame game of I wouldn't have done it this way. It failed. Now start listening to me. That was just the 20-year-old attitude of my, like in the mid 20s, I would say. And it doesn't really get you anywhere. The bosses that I've worked for, they screw up a million times anyway, and they don't want to hear it. They don't care that they messed up. Or they're like going back to ego. They don't want you to remind them. They don't care. They're not going to accept it. Like I've worked for plenty of people where mistakes that happen are just not in their DNA to say it was ever my fault. And trying to convince them it was is just a waste of time.
For sure. And this is a parallel to parenting comes in here. So for anyone not a parent, once your kids get to teenage years and above, they don't listen. and it's a case of it's very similar because you'll say, well, should you do it this way? And depending on the dynamic of your relationship with your children, it determines how you do this. But we've raised very independent children, so they are very vocal in their disagreement with what we're saying. But that's okay. We know that allows them to deal with the world better. But that also prevents us from having as much influence on them and pushing them in the direction we think is right. So it comes back to, it's the same thing. It's a case of, here's the idea. Okay, you didn't want that. Okay, I can see where this is going to go. I hope you succeed. I'm all for you. But I'm going to be ready to be there to pick up the pieces when it doesn't go right. So it's a big parallel to parenting, which is what the last minute you were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, I've had this conversation with my daughter.
Well, and also, I mean, there's another piece of it is kind of accepting that, you know, you might see the choice being made by the other person as not the right one, but how wrong is it? Maybe worth asking. Like, is it really a big deal if they use this other option? Is it that bad? I mean, there's an option of, hey, I want to go across the river to the other side. You can walk across a bridge, or you could jump in the water and have the current flow you away. Like, there's an obviously good or bad choice there. But if the idea is, no, we're going to spend extra money on a helicopter to take us over, it's like, all right, it's your money. we'll take the helicopter ride, but there's a perfectly good bridge here to walk across. And I've just had to sometimes take the helicopter ride. And if they ask about, well, wait, you didn't tell us about the bridge. I'm like, no, I did, but you wanted to do a helicopter ride. And I just kind of shrug my shoulders as that was a choice that was made. It cost more money, but it still got us there. And if you complain to me about budget, I'm going to say, well, there's a bridge and it's not falling apart. What I have to do is maybe put up more of a fight if it's about diving into the river, given that the current will definitely take you much farther away from the goal. But you have to just kind of like, sometimes your kids know what they want for themselves. And you just have to be like, okay, I don't see you jumping in a river, but you don't need a rocket ship to get over to the other side of this this gap, And that's the way it goes up the ladder too. And I think I have been happier in my roles since I quit trying to always feel like everything that comes out of my mouth needs to be the choice taken or the better bet.
Well, I know first thing I know is that I now want a helicopter ride.
It does have a good
been in a helicopter.
I imagine the view is better than the bridge. That's one thing I can guess.
And that was the business benefit you didn't see. If we're going to really extend the hypothetical, right? So the other thing is, I will say one of the most frustrating choices of mine that weren't taken had to do with growth potential of a particular venture. And the choice made was to keep things the size they were and to not expand. And I was very frustrated with that decision because I certainly felt there was the potential for growth. But with the potential for growth comes the potential for risk as well. So while I was frustrated with it and while I was certain of it, it was also, like you said, not necessarily something harmful. It was okay. We won't grow as fast, and that's okay. We're going to be what we are. So I definitely think you're right in doing taking that approach on making sure how important is this the hill to die on is the phrase.
So I mean, other than that, it's to me. Ego management, self-reflection, avoiding disaster, of course, stay on the ethical path, but, just bend a little bit more and accept that not everything you do is going to be the answer chosen on when people are faced with uncertainties. That's kind of how I've had to grow up over the years to become a better manager when I'm not in charge of everything. And
then the level up from that is document.
Yeah, exactly. So right now, I've definitely documented where you said we must use Firebase and do not use Rails.
Well, okay. First, those two statements are two different statements. The second statement's absolutely true.
Yes.
The first statement was more of you know what? We might as well spend time learning this.
Oh, I'm totally kidding. Both of us,
I know you are.
Both of us have chosen the Firebase trap.
It's the fire pit we're walking across.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. We haven't even talked about technology choices as a focus for any of these decisions, but I can't think of a single choice of tech where I was overruled that completely put a company in a disaster scenario. Like both sides were guessing. I had a guess as to the better one in my experience, but when I was overruled, it's not like a choice came in that was horrible.
Right, and that being with IBM, I have seen that happen.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you're not picking between a right and a wrong.
Yeah.
You're picking between two rights, and it's more of, and in addition, whatever path you've chosen, you're not going down the other path. So you have no basis of comparison. You only have the basis of hypothetical. So you could say we should have built it with Fortran instead of COBOL. But unless you built both, you don't know that was the right choice.
Yeah.
You just know it was a choice.
Now, from the other thing I should say is, it may not have been a disaster, but choices that are made by the people above you based on keeping up with the Joneses, or what's the popular flavor of the day from a technology branding standpoint. Managers above, managers are going back to the salesman talk. Managers that don't have technical expertise are much more easily swayed by a sales pitch regarding technology than cold, hard facts.
Agreed.
And so what I have seen happen a lot are companies that have so many different flavors of technology. They have Windows, they have Mac, they have Linux, they have 3 different database types. And it all speaks to choices being made about a good salesperson convince somebody, or the chatter amongst the dev community was go Mongo for everything kind of deal. And those are choices that you have to decide on if they're being made, if things are being decided that way. Is that a place where you like to work, or that you want to work?
Yeah.
That's sustainable.
Yeah. And for sure. And this isn't a story I've told yet, and I think we'll wrap on this story because it's one of my favorites,
Sure.
But it was painful. One of the companies I worked for previously that shall remain unnamed for this scenario, we had clients that used iPhones. We had clients that used Macs to access our website. Mm-hmm. But it was a Windows company. The technology used within the company was Microsoft through and through. Mm-hmm. So one day somebody got the CIO's ear, and all of a sudden there was a pronouncement across this multiple thousands employee company: we are no longer allowing Macs on the network.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking 2005. I'm not talking 1995. I'm talking 2016. Mm-hmm. This was a really strange decision. And we pushed back hard. The area I was in pushed back really hard, because if no Macs are allowed on the network, guess what? You're not building iOS applications anymore. It's just not happening. That was, we reported that up, and it fell on deaf ears, because whomever had presented the idea of, well, these security vulnerabilities are because I can't lock everything down because I don't have a homogeneous system. Yeah. That's, I think, where it all went. So it was like, okay, no more Macs. And then we circle back 3 months later, and that CIO was like, oh, that wasn't what I said. What I said is, any Macs we have to be within the data center. It changed.
Oh, of course,
sudden, right? Even though it was documented, because he had actually released this policy on the company network.
Yep.
That one was documented, but he was going to change his interpretation because it no longer fit the facts. But anyway, that's a story I've been dying to tell, because it's one of those where it's like, you have non-technology people making technical decisions. Yeah. And that one hurt. That one put us back a few months. And there was never, that's one I would have been happy to say, told you so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
because that was a brain dead decision.
And that's the thing is, I think the old me would have been full of anger over it. Like, this is such a dumb thing, and I don't like working here anymore. And I think now I'd just be like, well, give me a Windows machine. I'll see what I can get done with it compared to what I got done with a Mac. And frankly, right now I'm looking at Windows machines for, like, I like the surface drawing thing. So, maybe like not in the scenario that you're talking about, the extreme doesn't work. But now the other side of me is like, okay, people work with Windows all the time. People will work with Linux all the time. Maybe I roll with this and make it work. And
that's what we did is we rolled with it. We were like, okay, we have voiced our displeasure loudly. We're not making any headway, even though we thought it was obvious once we said you can't build any iOS applications. The decision's been made. What can we do instead? And the solution that came up with was, okay, we're going to put a virtual Mac on the network and you can build your iOS applications there, which we're not going to go into the details of how painful that is, but that was the decision made. So a decision was made. We came up with an alternative. That's I guess the part of the point.
And then the executive backtracked, which is completely expected.
Oh yeah, well, but he didn't completely backtrack in that there are still no Macs on that network.
Oh yeah.
So I can't figure it out. So that's neither here nor there. That was in the past. So anyway, that is the last time where I truly got angry, and I wasn't even angry. I was like, oh well, wait a minute, you surely do not know everything that's going on. And then when presented with everything that was going on and still being told, it doesn't matter, that's when I got angry. But
all right, well, that is a good story to end on. All right. I think we covered the topic well. There's a lot of growth in this one for me, and how when I look in the mirror and say, oh, this is how I deal with these choices and stuff. So it's been interesting. I don't know what age it is where I started to change my mind, but it's just how I deal with these kind of scenarios is a lot different, and for the better, definitely for the better.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like in your case, you had somebody push you in that direction as well, which is always.
Oh yeah. Listen to the people that deal with you every day. That's definitely worth doing. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap it up. But good talk, and we'll talk next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the CTO Think podcast. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at ctothink.com. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. Patreon contributions help us to produce episode transcripts, which allow people that are deaf or hard of hearing to access the show. If you have feedback, ideas, or want to be a guest, please email us at hello@ctothink.com. Show music is Dumpster Dive by Mark Wallach, licensed by premiumbeat.com. Voiceover work by meganvoices.com. You'll hear from us next week.